Hi, and welcome to the Should You Buy for the STG and STG Guard. Let's go ahead and look at the bundles that Wargaming is selling for us here. We have the basic bundle for the STG, which is $43.99. And of course, you get the tank and a garage slot. You have the loaded bundle, which you get the tank, the garage slot, enhanced gunline drive, large caliber gun rammer, vertical stabilizer, and 1500 gold. And of course, that is $58.99. And we have the ultimate bundle, which is $99.99. Of course, you get the tank, you get a garage slot, you get an enhanced gunline drive, you get a large caliber gun rammer, you get a vertical stabilizer, you get 20 personal reserves for 200% crew XP, 3,000 gold, and you get a multiplier of 5 XP for the first 15 wins in the STG. Now, there is the guard variant, which is basically a skin on the STG. And there's no price difference. There's no difference between these two tanks other than its appearance here with the skin on it. So if that's your thing, definitely pick that one up if you're looking into this. Well, let's go ahead and shift on over to our trusty Tanks GG here and see exactly what this tank is about. Now, this is the tank and all its stats, and this is an unmodified tank here I'm showing you. There's no equipment on it. There's no skills. This is exactly the tank and the stats you will be getting when you pick up this tank if you go ahead and have basically just 100% crew in there with no skills. So you can see that the DPM is rather low, but then again it does have 390 alpha damage and 212 millimeters of penetration, which is outstanding for a tier 8 medium tank. Also, the dispersion or accuracy is amazing for the 122 millimeter. It is 0.32, which may be one of the most accurate 122 millimeters in the game thus far. Also, a quick note is that the shell cost for the standard shells isn't astronomical. It's not over 1,000. It's not 1,000. It is 840, which isn't great, but at the same time, it's not ridiculous. This tank is pretty mobile at 50 kilometers an hour forward and 20 reverse. It does have a power to weight ratio of 14.2, which is acceptable. It's all right for a medium tank. It's not outstanding. It's I guess it would be kind of standard. Around 15 is around the standard for medium tanks. Of course, you have the train resistances. And another quick note that is very interesting with this tank is it does have the turret at the rear of the tank, as we can see here. And it does have 6 degrees of gun depression, which is very, very good for a rear turreted tank. Also, the turret can traverse 360 degrees, which is amazing. And the armor. Now, this is a bit of a mixed bag, and these numbers are very deceptive. And for that, I want to go ahead and get into the 3D model here so we can see exactly what this armor is about. Let's go ahead and put this tank on roughly level ground here, and we can see that that frontal hull armor of 100 is slightly angled at about 39 degrees. So that equals about 130 millimeters of frontal armor, about 140 on the lower plate. But as this is a tier 8 and does meet tier 10s, this tank will be penetrated by almost everything that shoots at you, including tier 6s. You will be pretty lucky to bounce a shot off of your upper plate here, even facing off against a tier 6. Now the sides, they are 45 millimeters thick, and they are capable of bouncing shots or ricocheting shots if you're angled properly. And as this turreted medium tank does have a turret at the rear here, it does make getting those shots a little bit easier. So if you're aimed something like this with the gun directly pointed at you, you can see here that this is a decent ricochet zone. And of course, once you get here onto the front bit, the front portion, yeah, they're going to blast right through that. That's 120 millimeters thick, and you're going to basically take those shots because it's pretty much flat if you angle. So they'll be punching through that no problem. Additionally, that 210 millimeters that we saw on the turret armor is basically right here, right below the gun mantlet. And we can see here's 210 millimeters, and as you go ahead and transition out, it drops to 200, and then 180, 150, 130. So basically this turret is roughly anywhere from what, 210 to 160, roughly 150, something like that. Also the cupola, if they're so inclined to shoot you in the cupola and not just go ahead and blast through your turret here. The cupola is only 130 millimeters thick, so unless they hit it at some obscure angle, they are going to go ahead and punch through that very easily. So that's a quick note about the armor. It's not really to be trusted. This is not a frontline brawler. This is not a tank that you take up in the front with the heavy tanks. This is not a T-54 Mod 1. This is very much a sniper, and we see that when we go back to the stats with the awesome dispersion or accuracy here and a good amount of penetration, especially for a medium tank. Now let's go ahead and look at the premium shells here, and you can see that the shell velocity increases by a little over 100, so 880 to so about 120 meters per second. But also the cost goes through the roof, so it's no longer 840 credits per shell, it's 4,400. And for that price, you are gaining about 36 millimeters of penetration here. So keep that in mind, that when you go ahead and dab that 2 key, that the cost gets really pricey really quickly, and you gain some penetration, but it's not a huge amount. So like I said, this is the tank in its stock configuration. This is how you will buy it. Now, what's this tank look like with a good solid configuration? For that, I went ahead and I set it up here, and for this we have, of course, the vertical stabilizers. We have a gun rammer, and I went ahead and I equipped the coated optics here, because we can see that the coated optics give a huge boost to the view ranges, which is what they're supposed to do, obviously, but this tank really suffers from a lack of view range. 370 meters, excuse me, in its stock configuration is not very good. That's really a substandard, especially for tier 8. Now, I also equipped some skills, because this would be the ideal setup. I have Brothers in Arms, I have Off-Road Driving, I have Snapshot, and of course I have Safe Stowage. Now, don't get me wrong, you could obviously equip more skills to go ahead and improve some of these stats, but this would be a crew that's 100% trained with their first skill, I guess their second skill, because you include Brothers in Arms and all these. So just keep that in mind. And I guess if you had the if it was a 2-skill crew, the commander would probably have Recon in addition to Brothers in Arms. But just keep that in mind, that this tank can be fantastic once the crew has roughly a skill or 2 in them, and this tank really shines and comes to light once you have those skills. Just like most tanks, that's really where this tank shines. Now let's go ahead and look straight into the comparison here, because this is a should you buy session, and I want to let you guys see exactly what this tank is all about. Now, this is stock configuration, obviously, on all these tanks, and you can see that the DPM is the lowest in this comparison here between the Object 416, the T-54 Mod 1, and the T-34-3. Now, quick note, the T-34-3 is a preferential matchmaking tank, so it can only see tier 9s. It does not see tier 10s, so just keep that in mind when you're looking at this comparison here. Now, obviously, the penetration on these tanks is clearly in the favor of the STG in this comparison. In fact, the T-34-3 here really lags behind with that 122 millimeter. But then again, 122 millimeter does pack quite the punch at 390, and we see that in both these tanks. The Object 416 does have 320, which is actually very good, and it does have the highest DPM at 2,500 DPM there. This tank, the STG, does take 13.4 seconds to reload, which seems like a very long time. However, this tank, like I said, should not be up on the front lines trying to duke it out with heavy tanks. This is more of a sniping, mobile, hard-hitting tank is how this tank should be played. Let's go ahead and move on down here. Now, this is what I'm talking about with that sniping, hard-hitting. The aim time is 2.4. That is fantastic for a 122 millimeter. For instance, the T-34-3 with its 122 millimeter has a 3.2 second aim time, which is very slow. 2.4 is very good. In fact, a good number of medium tanks that are not 122 millimeters actually have right around this time as far as aiming goes. Now, the dispersion is amazing on this tank, and I think there's one thing where this tank really stands out. It would be in the dispersion, the accuracy. Now, I hasten to add that on the move and when you're turning your turret and you're traversing your tank, the accuracy is horrible. These values are very high. See, 21 versus like 12, 19, 17. So basically, this tank is a very much sit still and fire type of tank. This is not a come around the corner and try and blast somebody type of tank. Those shots, you'll be lucky to hit most of those shots. Another additional note is that the 6 degrees of gun depression, as I mentioned earlier, is fantastic. This rear turreted medium here has 6 degrees of gun depression. You can see the object 416, which is a rear turreted medium, Soviet medium, only has 3 degrees, which is terrible. And even the front, I guess mid-turreted mounted T-34-3 only has 5 degrees. So basically the STG does have very good depression for a rear turreted tank. In terms of mobility, it's right on par or a little bit better than most of its competition here. Just 50 forward and 20 in reverse. Now, when it comes to the power to weight ratio, it is a little bit sluggish in comparison to the other ones, but not a huge amount. And we must also add that the terrain resistances are very good in the STG here. So just keep that in mind that yes, it does have the lowest power to weight ratio in this comparison. However, we can see the terrain resistances are very good, and they kind of outshine most of the other tanks in this comparison. Moving on to the armor and hit points, and as you saw earlier, I went through the armor scheme here, and so these numbers are not quite accurate, especially this 210 millimeters of turret armor. It's very deceptive. Now, if you're looking for a heavily armored tank, just go ahead and look at the 254 Mod 1. While the numbers don't look amazing, you know, 200 millimeters, you have to incorporate that the angling on these plates and all this armor are very good, and this tank can bounce a ton of shots if you angle it properly. And for the last note, I want to go ahead and highlight, as I mentioned earlier, the view range. It is lacking. 380 is okay. 370 is pretty bad. So like I said, I would highly recommend the optics over the ventilation system. So you can go ahead and get that view range up as high as possible and be able to spot for yourself and spot for your team. And with that said, guys, thank you for watching. That was my should you buy on the STG.